Hello, Warfare students, and welcome to This Week, where we discuss the Punic Wars. But before we get to the war, I'd like to introduce you to the Carthaginians, because they're super duper nifty and about to have a very bad experience with Rome, eventually. Carthage is a Phoenician colony, one of many in the Mediterranean. You may recall from the Greco-Persian Wars that the Phoenicians were the state-of-the-art technologists in the sphere of shipbuilding. They cooperated somewhat with the Ionians, but they had their own trade secrets, and they maintained wide-ranging sea routes, which meant that their ships were just a little bit better, just a little bit earlier. They've been around indeed since the Bronze Age, where they were both victims of and implicated in sea people raids. One of the many colonies that the Phoenicians founded in the Mediterranean was Carthage, New City. This was a colony of Tyre, a city in the Levant, and uh, the name means new city because it was a very late foundation Phoenician colony city. This map is a little misleading. So this is showing Carthaginian territory at the start of the First Punic War, but Carthage wasn't necessarily holding all of that territory as part of a colonial government. Rather, the Carthaginians preferred to have multiple trading outposts where they would cooperate with locals in order to maintain trade networks. They were all about making money, guarding shipping secrets, and using it to the advantage of other Phoenician states. Much like Greek city-states, they are independent city-states, so Carthage doesn't have to do what Tyre says, and Tyre doesn't have to do what Carthage says. But there's a fellow feeling due to shared heritage and religion and so forth. Now, eventually, Carthage does become more traditionally colonial. But where we begin, the territory they hold is held cooperatively with local folks and also part of a trade hegemony, a little bit like what Macedon's doing on the other side of the Mediterranean. Anything else I want to say about this? Nah, that's a good introduction. So here's another map, this one showing territory directly held by Carthage, which gives you a better idea of what the orange on that map meant in terms of actual land owned. So Carthage and its satellite cities are all coastal, they're harbor stop-offs, and they're connected via trade routes to the African and Spanish interior. Carthage focused on creating mutually beneficial alliances and trade deals along the western Mediterranean coast and out into the Atlantic. Because other Phoenician city-states had the market cornered in the eastern Mediterranean, Carthage had to start poking around elsewhere. And in order to do that, they needed to develop the ship technology that will and the navigation technology that would allow them to go dependably and safely into the North and South Atlantic along the coast of Europe and Africa, which is precisely what they did. But there was some inland holding. One of the advantages to where Carthage is in the 200s BCE is that the Sahara was much smaller then. It hadn't dried as much as it has today. And we're not talking like global warming results drying. The Sahara has been in a drying cycle for thousands of years. This process was ongoing in the ancient world, and it hadn't really extended as far. So there was a lot more arable farmland interior from Carthage on that promontory sticking out into the Mediterranean. My pen here. Sorry, my cat is banging her head into the laptop. Hi, kitty. Okay. Seriously? Your brother went to bed. It's okay.
Tago de Linda est.
I know. Anyway. Where was I going with this? Oh, right. So the other map I've given you is of the Eastern Mediterranean. I mentioned that there are other Phoenician colony states in the area, including Sidon and Tyre. These cities are the parent cities of Carthage and naval powers in their own rights. So that's the eastern arm of this whole network. Now, Carthage Harbor. Did I finish talking about arable land? Did I?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Um, the main take-home point about the arable land is that Carthage is sitting on a particularly fertile bit of Mediterranean real estate, not like Egypt levels of fertile, but fertile enough that Carthage had a huge grain supply, which is why they needed this. Behold a reconstruction of Carthage Harbor. I'm not going to be able to show you remains of Carthage Harbor because, well, there aren't any. Or rather, there are. They just date from a later period of inhabitation. After the Punic Wars, Rome refounds Carthage as a Roman city because its location is fantastic and it has a great deep water harbor. And you can see why. So this is on a promontory that has encircling rock outcrops, the very edge of that mountain chain going down the uh, Spain of the northwestern coast of Africa. Here we're looking out to sea. This part of the harbor is the merchant harbor, and here you can see the docks and the warehouses nearby. So trading vessels could sail into this harbor and be protected from storms blowing in from the Mediterranean, not just by the seawalls around the harbor, but also by the jutting land masses around the harbor. And it's a very deep water harbor. The last deep water harbor before you get into the sandbars of the middle and east of the coast of North Africa. So this is the last stop for a while, which makes it a very valuable trading location. If you want to stop on your way between the eastern and western Mediterranean, Carthage is the most logical port, and it has safer harbors than, say, Sicily. I mean, Syracuse is a pretty nice harbor, but Carthage is linked by land to North Africa, which was a valuable urbanized part of the ancient Mediterranean and an important place for trade as well. Because of the Sahara's cooler, wetter nature at this period, it was also possible to travel over the mountains into sub-Saharan Africa via Carthaginian lands, which is also nice. Now, I said that this red circle here has the merchant harbor, so you may be wondering what this is. This is Carthage's version of the Zea harbor in Athens. This is the military harbor, and it is encircled not just by this one sea wall and breakwater here, which had sea gates that could be closed if the harbor was under invasion, but then there's this second set of walls also encircling the ship sheds. And then these ship sheds are 3 deep so that you can put hundreds of galleys into dry dock at the same time. There are also galleys here on the central island. We think there might have been repair docks there as well, and the buildings around this area would have been support buildings for building ships, making ship parts, doing repairs, and for workmen to hang out. Behind it is the Agora, so here's the marketplace of Carthage. Carthage was a lot like Rome in that it had a senate with elected officials and a popular assembly who would vote on policy. Carthage and Rome are more alike to each other than Rome is perhaps to Athens. And that's relevant here because Rome and Carthage could have cooperated, and at some points in their history they did. We were just talking about Pyrrhus of Epirus's invasion of Italy. In that conflict, Carthage was Rome's ally. So some stuff is going to change in the next few years. This relationship sours and becomes toxic, perhaps due in part to the fact that Rome and Carthage are pretty similar cities. Rome was founded by a combination of colonists and locals. It's a place that has open citizenship and paths to citizenship. Not all Mediterranean city-states do. Carthage, similarly, is a nation that is very immigrant friendly, travel friendly, diverse, metropolitan. In many ways, Carthage was ahead of Rome in all of these things. It was wealthier, it had the better ship designs, it was more connected, it had older diplomatic networks with the rest of the Mediterranean. Carthage was set up for success in so many ways, one of them being this harbor. It's really iconic. We don't see anything else like this in the ancient world. As close as you're kind of going to come is the harbor of Athens during the Peloponnesian Wars. And even then, it's not this big and not this impressive. So, good job, Carthage. And this isn't necessary, really, but I found this on DeviantArt when I was looking for pictures of Carthage Harbor, and like, what is going on here? Who made this fan art? What were they thinking? Why is there a griffin? And where are his private parts? Just so many questions. But you'll notice Carthage Harbor, right? It's really iconic. There's the merchant harbor. There's the military harbor. You can see the buildings of the Agora there. And then this is the Acropolis of Carthage, the hill of Byrsa, there in the distance. So, okay, internet. All right. So back to Carthage itself. The harbor, it's a great harbor. If I had to pick a harbor in the ancient world, it would be Carthage Harbor. Unlike Rome, whose harbor is so notoriously awful that it has to be dredged regularly, and they invented underwater setting concrete specifically to make their harbor usable because it's just so shallow and muddy and silty and awful. Carthage does not have this problem. It also has multiple walls, really nice walls. It doesn't need long walls because the harbor is right there, right? There's the harbor. Actually, let me use a blue pen for this, right? So here's the harbor. You can see the Agora. Byrsa is the citadel. This has the major temples of the area. I should use blue. Here we go. And this, we think the Carthaginian Senate building, temples to Baal and Tanit, and no, those are the highlights. I'll leave it at that. All of these red lines around the city of Carthage are walls. So there's not just one, not two, but three walls coming inland. So if you want to advance on the city of Carthage, you have to pound your way through three walls with three heavily fortified gates, walls spaced so that as you get behind one wall, the next wall is already waiting to throw things down on your head. This was a ridiculously difficult nut to crack. Even when the Carthaginians were desperate at the end of the Third Punic War, Rome was really hard-pressed to break into this area, even with siege equipment. Now, it's not just by land, however, that you have these multiple layers of envelation, but from the sea, if you were to land somehow on this promontory coming in, you would run into another wall. But then also, this is mountainous. If you look at the topographical map, so here is the city of Carthage. This little bink right here is the city of Carthage. There's a mountain here, and Carthage goes right down into the water without a long sloping beach. So making a landfall next to Carthage is pretty much impossible. If you want to send your fleet over to Carthage to land, you have to do it closer to here around Thapsus. Make your beach landing, and then march up to Carthage. There's another cliff face and seawall here, and even if you broke through all these walls, you would end up in the suburban district next to the tombs and the kilns, so you wouldn't actually be in the political heart of Carthage. You would have to invade through yet another wall, this wall around the citadel, the high point of the city. We're not going to see a city this fortified again until we look at Jerusalem. Jerusalem also super impressive. I love a city that takes its walls seriously. Carthage's walls were just super duper amazing. And if civilization breaks down and I have to found a city-state, I'm rebuilding Carthage. It's not a coincidence that it took Rome so gosh darn long to beat Carthage, and it took quite a lot of determination and freaking dumb luck. Rome is about to do some things that you're never supposed to do during war, and they make it work. Nuts. But we're not there yet. We've got to talk about Carthage's network of allies. So I mentioned they have trade networks everywhere, and I meant everywhere. So here we're looking at a map of the kingdoms and principalities and nations of the Mediterranean during the height of Carthaginian rule. So here we're talking about the 3rd century, the 200s BCE into the 100s BCE. So the Roman Republic, actually this is Second Punic War. You can tell because the Roman Republic has land in Spain. Is that second? No, actually this is Third Punic War, so even close enough. All right, so Carthage is here. Inland from Carthage is Numidia. You'll notice Carthage just has this little bink of land. Numidia was a different nation, but they were Carthaginian allies from way back. And what they provided to Carthage was something Carthage didn't naturally have. That is cavalry, a well-trained cavalry. The Numidian cavalry was on a par with the kind of cavalry we see in Macedon and in Persia, which is now Parthia at this point. Parthia, right over here. See, it's gaining ground. It's doing well. Plucking away the Seleucids. Good job. Keep that in mind. This is going to be an important plot point. So the Numidian cavalry is a big deal, and there are also trade routes over the mountains here run by Berber nomads into bits of sub-Saharan Africa that at this point still included some forested jungle areas. North African forest elephants are smaller than Indian elephants, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I've given you a documentary about this, so watch to find out more about the nifty elephants of Carthage. But because they have sea sailing capability, they're maintaining regular trade routes down along the coast of Africa as far as Mount Cameroon. And these are trade routes that also support immigration to and from the western edge of North Africa. Similarly, Carthage's allies in northern Europe were made along this North Atlantic sea route, so along the Atlantic coast of Spain and modern-day France, through the English Channel and into Scandinavia. These are sea routes that they mapped and controlled for the purposes of trade, and from it they got amber, gemstones, tin, iron, a bit silver. Britain has particularly profitable silver mines. And this meant that Carthage's allies included the Gallic tribes in both modern-day France and modern-day Spain, so the Celtiberians and the Gauls. And they also had some allies along the Danube. And at some points, the Ligurians, whose territory extends into Cisalpine Gaul, that is northern Italy on the side of the Alps that Rome is on. Not just that, but Carthage had allies coming out of the Greek-speaking world. They had enormous coffers, and they used this to hire the finest mercenaries in the Eastern Mediterranean, including a lot of professional soldiers who were regularly employed in the multiple dynastic wars going on between the heirs of Alexander, which just never end until Rome gets involved. And then they're really over. So let's see. Who else are the Carthaginians pulling in? Oh yes, the Libyans. So the Libyans, ancient Libya is not the same as modern Libya. So it extends all the way across this sweep of central North Africa. I was mentioning the sandbars in the middle of North Africa. That's here. So after Carthage, this all is sandbar until you get to Cyrene, which is part of the Ptolemaic Empire. And let's see, is that everybody? Yeah, that's about everybody. Now look at this from the perspective of Rome. Rome's here, right? So Carthage is here, and Carthage's allies are here, 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 here. Rome is surrounded by people who really like Carthage, people who depend on the Carthaginians in the greater Phoenician network to maintain their lives of supply and trade, especially for luxury goods and things like strong pharmaceutical substances. So the opium trade is partly going through Phoenician shipping lanes. Oh, by the way, Carthaginians had also mapped the Red Sea area into um, the waters around India, modern day India. And through that trade route, they were able to gain access at certain times to Indian elephants, but also Indian silk, Indian trade goods, and Indian immigrants. So the Carthaginians are people you really don't want to tick off, yes? And at first, it looks like Rome is going to be yet another friend of Carthage. From Carthage's point of view, the more friends, the better. You can make money off of your friends. But there are limits to that. And Carthage began to realize that their military wasn't quite up to speed with the other militaries of the Mediterranean. Now, if your official policy is maintaining treaties and trade contacts in order to keep stable shipping lanes, that's a good choice. It's a great choice. But part of the payoff, or the drawback rather, is that you're expending a lot of resources on your shipbuilding, your diplomacy, your bribery, and so on. You're not spending as much time training your soldiers. Carthage also didn't seem to have a large citizen soldier base. Uh, but at a certain point, Carthage realizes they need to hire an expert contractor, which is what they do. They hire in a guy named Xanthippus of Sparta, who reforms the Carthaginian military into a state-of-the-art hoplite phalanx. Here we're talking Macedonian-style phalanx. So we have phalangites with sarissai, some hypospates, the Numidian and the Carthaginian cavalry. Mostly the Numidian is keeping the wings so that they can engage in hammer and anvil tactics like Macedon, and an elephant corps at the very front. So where the Romans are putting their velites, here, the Carthaginians are putting their elephants. So the velites are not going to be able to throw javelins into an elephant and make much of a dent, yes, but the elephant can totally trample over the velites and plow right into the hastati. Elephants are like wrecking balls. You can send them right into a phalanx and they are going to tromp through the formations. And that's something that Rome has a hard time dealing with, even as they develop some tips and tricks out of the Pyrrhic Wars. There's only so far you can get by scaring elephants with fire, especially when they are smaller and therefore easier to control, as Carthaginian elephants are. So don't assume that bigger elephant equals better tactical elephant. Sometimes you just need a nice little Sherman tank of an elephant. And they're adorable. They're so cute. So this battle diagram, just for the record, is from the Battle of Zama. We're not there yet, but this is a bit of a teaser. So there's the Carthaginian line with Hannibal. The Roman formation, you'll notice the maniples are lined up, not in a quincunx formation like we saw last week, but they're in files. They're these big gaps in the Roman line, and only tiny maniples in the gaps. What the Romans do is, as the elephants are beginning to stampede, they slide this front line gap back, opening up these channels through their lines. The elephants just, because elephants aren't idiots, yeah, they see, oh, great, there's an elephant-sized gap in that line. I'm going to run through it. So they run between the maniples, and then the Romans just slide back out. And that is how you defeat an elephant corps. I hope that's useful to you someday. Actually, I hope your life doesn't come to a point where you need to know how to defeat elephants. That's just not happy for anyone. All right, so now we've got the setup. Let's talk about what happens in the Punic Wars. How does Rome manage to win this face-off? next time.